There's nothing like the sound of an electric guitar. It's an instrument that defines several genres of music like blues, funk, and rock. But not only does the electric guitar define several types of music, which electric guitar you play defines who you are as a person. You might think you chose your guitar, but you didn't. It chose you. From the second you walked into Guitar Center, it called out to you from halfway across the store. And so did the 5 employees who immediately ran over to you, desperate to make a commission so that they too can buy a new guitar. Before you even ask one of the salivating Guitar Center employees to take the guitar down from the wall so you can try it out, you already know it's going home with you. Not because of the way it sounds or the way it feels, but because it's the only guitar in the store within your price range they have in your favorite shade of cerulean blue. You get the guitar, get home, and immediately start playing. Not with the guitar, but with your phone trying to take the perfect picture of you with the guitar so you can show it off to all your friends. You can't wait to tell them everything they don't want to know about your new acts. And it can't wait to tell the world everything we don't want to know about you. So let's see what your guitar says about you, right after we see what happens when you hit that like button. Number 1, Fender Telecaster. You're a little bit country, you're a little bit rock and roll, and you're a little intimidated by guitars that have more than 2 knobs and 2 single coil pickups. So, since Fender is the only guitar brand you've ever heard of, the Telecaster was an obvious choice. The Telecaster is a versatile guitar capable of creating a variety of rich tones. Unlike you, who's a rigid guitarist, incapable of playing anything outside of your formulaic sub-subgenre. But you don't care. You bought your Telecaster for its signature twangy sound, not to get creative with sound design. Your neighbor, however, does care because he's had to get creative with soundproofing his apartment so he doesn't have to hear you twanging out the same 3 chords night after night. You love your Telly, almost as much as your neighbors, family, and friends hate it. You love your Telecaster so much, you put a bumper sticker on your car that says, "If it ain't got that twang, it ain't my thing." You even changed your Twitter handle to Shania Twang. I'd ask you where your Telecaster was made, but you probably have no fucking idea, even though it's written right on the guitar. As far as you're concerned, it was made in heaven. Truth is, I don't really care whether your Telly was made in America or Mexico, and neither does anybody else. It's not like it's a Strat. Number 2, Fender Stratocaster. Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan. The list goes on and on. The Stratocaster is one of, if not the most iconic guitars of all time. It's also one of the most mass-produced, which is why you bought it. Because it's one of the few types of guitar your local music store sells, and they happen to have one in a color that matches your eyes. When people talk about the Fender Stratocaster, they're talking about the American Strat. None of that Mexican-made shit. Sure, Mexican Strats may look, feel, and sound nearly identical to their American counterparts, and only cost 1/3 of the price. But you can't put a price on coolness, and that's what you're really after. It's a certified known fact backed by science that no matter who you are, holding a Stratocaster will make you look cooler. Well, to everybody except other guitar players. To us, it just makes you look like a basic bitch. But you don't care what other guitarists think. If you did, you would have bought a unique guitar that's fun for others to play, instead of the same fucking guitar everyone else has that every guitarist has already played a million times before. If you want people to think you're a professional musician, the American Stratocaster is one of your safest bets. Nothing says, I'm a cool guitarist, but also a totally dependable professional musician like a Strat. Some other things your Strat says about you? I'm not edgy at all. I'm a follower. I'm incapable of thinking for myself. All I want is to fit in. Conformity makes me comfortable. I'm afraid to take risks. I'm happy to bend over for any and all authority figures. I desperately want you to like me. I desperately want to like me. Vanilla is my favorite flavor. Unlike yours, a Stratocaster's body is perfect in every way, which is why every guitar company makes a Strat replica. Hell, they're so perfect, even some non-guitar companies make them. My first guitar was a Strat lookalike made by some brand called Horny or Hormel, which I'm pretty sure is a brand that makes canned chili. What does it say about you if you play some no-name knockoff Strat copy? Nothing good. At best, it says you can only play 3 chords because you're just starting out. Or just stratting out, rather. At worst, it says you don't care how you look or sound, and likely have about as much self-esteem as the guy from The Offspring. Actually, I take that back. Dexter Holland's got way more self-esteem than you, because at least he plays a brand-name guitar. If you play a signature Strat like the Jeff Beck Strat, or the Stevie Ray Strat, and the signature on the guitar belongs to anyone who isn't you, congratulations, you just paid double for what is essentially a regular Strat. If the guitar had an actual signature, that'd be one thing, but it doesn't. It has the stamp of a signature, which is about as cool as buying a Mexican Strat and stamping Made in America on the back of the headstock. Number 3, Gibson Les Paul. If you want people to look at you and your instrument and think, that right there is a professional musician, you've really only got two guitar options: the American Stratocaster, which we already talked about, and the Gibson Les Paul. That's because they're the only two types of guitar that the average person is likely to recognize. But you're not the average person. You play a Gibson Les Paul, which means it's the only guitar you recognize, or at least it's the only kind you're willing to acknowledge. Musicians play Les Pauls for the same reason hedge fund managers wear Rolex watches, so people will know you can afford it, and so that you can look down on the people who can't. For the price of a single Gibson Les Paul, you could buy an American Strat, a Mexican Strat, a Squire Strat, a knockoff Strat, guitar straps for all four of your new Strats, and even still have enough money left to buy a cool Strat hat. But you don't care. You love your Les Paul, and wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, except maybe another Gibson Les Paul. Though not nearly as affordable, cool-looking, or comfortable to play as a Stratocaster, what the Les Paul lacks in these areas, it more than makes up for with its thick, beefy tone. You won't find any of that single-coil pickup pussy shit like you will on a Strat or a Tele. Any Les Paul owner will tell you, single-coil pickups are for suckers. Real motherfuckers play guitars with humbuckers. But what if you can't even afford a beat-up, barely functional pre-owned Les Paul and still want that signature look? You could sell a kidney, then maybe at least be able to put a down payment on a Gibson Les Paul. I mean, you really only need one kidney, and you only need one Les Paul, so the math checks out. But luckily, there's another option, and it won't cost you any of your vital organs. Only your pride and self-respect. Number 4, Epiphone Les Paul. Playing an Epiphone Les Paul is like driving a 4-cylinder Ford Mustang with an automatic transmission. It's not nearly as fun, doesn't sound nearly as good, and is nowhere near as fulfilling as driving a manual Mustang GT. But aside from car enthusiasts, anyone who sees you driving it will just think, that's a dude in a Mustang. Just like anyone who sees you playing your Epiphone Les Paul will think that's a dude with a real guitar. You love your Epiphone Les Paul because it's just like you, cheap. And even though you secretly envy people who own a Gibson Les Paul, you love talking shit about how they got ripped off, overpaying for what is essentially the same guitar as yours. But it's not. Theirs says Gibson and yours doesn't, which makes both them and their guitars better than you in every way. Number 5, anything Jackson or Ibanez. If you consider 200 beats per minute to be a slow song and own more than one type of distortion pedal, odds are you play a Jackson Dinky, an Ibanez RG, or something similar. Something with 24 frets and a Floyd Rose lock and tremolo system. That's because you only care about one thing: performance. Unfortunately, you haven't been able to perform a fucking thing since you bought the guitar because you can't get the Floyd Rose to stay in tune. You don't care how your guitar looks to the average person. If you did, you would have bought a Stratocaster. But you're not trying to impress Joe Average. You're trying to impress Joe Strummer, aka other guitarists. The only thing that brings you joy in life is getting likes by other guitarists on TikTok for the 3-second videos you spend 3 weeks working on and have to do 300 takes to get just right. You're all about speed, precision, technique. You're also about arrogance, pretension, and conceit. You don't think you're better than other guitarists. You know it. Not because you go back and forth trading licks, trying to one-up each other, but because you haven't stopped playing since you showed up and haven't given anyone else the chance to play a single fucking note. People who own Ibanez or Jackson guitars want only one thing: to shred. These are the type of people who write the solo to a song before writing the song itself. They show up to band practice, bust out a 3-minute guitar solo, and expect the other members to write a song around it. But the band can't do that because as soon as they start working on the song, you drown them out by soloing something else in a totally different key. Number 6, Gibson Flying V. You don't care about music theory or proper technique. The only technique you've worked on is how to hold the guitar when sitting down so it doesn't slide off your leg. A technique that still needs work. There's only one reason to buy a Gibson Flying V: to look cool. But you don't look cool. You look like you're trying to look cool, which to the rest of us makes you look like an asshole. I get where the confusion comes from. I'm not gonna lie, the guitar itself does look kinda cool when it's just sitting there. But from the second you pick it up to the second you put it down, it makes you look like a douchebag. The guitar might be called the Flying V, but it just makes you look like a giant D. The only, and I mean only person who ever looked cool playing a Flying V was Randy Rhoads. But unfortunately, Randy and his polka-dotted Flying V went flying into a fucking tree. He'll never fly high again, just like you'll never look cool with that guitar. Number 7, offset guitars. In the 1950s, Fender said, fuck symmetry, and put out several offset guitars which ranged from off-putting to off-full. These include the Fender Mustang, the Jaguar, and the Jazzmaster. Though you think your offset guitar is awesome, it just makes you look awkward. Actually, I take that back. The guitar doesn't make you look awkward. You're just fucking awkward in general. Which is why you were drawn to your offset guitar's weird-shaped body, confusing knobs, and bad pickups in the first place. You wanted a guitar that outwardly reflects your inner oddball, and you found it. If you bought one of these pieces of shit over the past 30 years, there's a 99% chance you bought it because of Kurt Cobain. The other 1% are people who saw the trademark Fender headstock, mistook it for a Strat or maybe a Tele, and bought it by accident. Then, because the small mom-and-pop music shop you bought it from went out of business because they built a guitar center on the other side of town, you can't return it. So, you're stuck with your Fender Jizzmaster for life because you can't find anyone that'll buy it from you. There isn't a single thing about offset guitars that make them cool, aside from the fact that Kurt Cobain liked them, which can make them extremely cool if you're a Nirvana fan, of which I am and always have been. But while Kurt was one of the greatest songwriters of his generation, he was also one of the shittiest, sloppiest guitar players. I know this because when I was first learning to play guitar in the 90s, I picked up 1,000 bad habits by trying to emulate his style of playing that have taken me decades to fix. So, while Kurt's an unquestionably talented singer and songwriter, I wouldn't recommend taking guitar advice from him any more than I'd recommend taking his dating advice. Number 8. Steinberger or other headless guitars. If you chop the head off of a chicken, it runs around for a minute before finally dying. If you chop the head off a guitar, any coolness it might have had dies instantly. A Steinberger executive in a 1979 board meeting asked, "How can we make a guitar that plays like a regular guitar, sounds like a regular guitar, but looks really fucking stupid?" After brainstorming some ideas, they picked the best one, and that's how the headless guitar was born. On the one hand, I respect headless guitar players. You don't give a fuck what the average person thinks about you, and you don't give even a quarter of a fuck what other guitarists think of you. I respect that. But, on the other hand, while you might not care what others think of you, you're on a non-stop mission to prove to every single person you come across that your headless guitar is not only as good as a regular guitar, but far superior. It's not. Aside from being 2% shorter and 2% lighter, it's 20% more expensive, 200% uglier, and 2,000% less cool. Number 9. 7-plus string guitars like Schecter's, ESP, Ibanez, so-and-so. On a regular 6-string guitar, you can drop the low E string to a D. You can even drop it to a C before it starts sounding really shitty. But that's not low enough for you. You want your strings to sound the way you feel, as low as it gets, which is why you bought a guitar that has more than 6 strings, but less than 12. Odds are, you bought a 7-string guitar because you wanted that extra low B string. But since you haven't even mastered playing a regular 6-string guitar yet, any additional strings are really just extra opportunities to fuck up. So you went with the 7-string guitar instead of an 8 or a 9-string because it only has one extra string for you to unintentionally hit while playing the 99% of songs that only require 6 strings. Ironically, whenever I ask you to play something on your 7-string, you bust out some distorted, heavily palm-muted riff that doesn't touch the G, B, or high E strings at all. So, even though your guitar has 7 strings, it might as well only have 4 because that's all you use. At this point, you're basically a bass player. And not the good kind. The kind who plays with a pick and doesn't even own a bass of his own. Number 10. Gibson SG. You're a Gibson guy all the way. Or at least you want to be, even though you've never actually played one, because the guy at Guitar Center won't take a Les Paul down for you to play until you can convince him you have enough money for a down payment. So, you go on Musician's Friend and look around. You're wise enough to know how stupid you'd look with a Flying V, but not wealthy enough to be able to afford a Les Paul. So, you order a Gibson SG, which should be called the Gibson SC, as in second choice, because it's nobody's first. SG stands for solid guitar, and it is a pretty solid choice if you want a generic-sounding guitar that sorta looks cool and is made by a top-tier brand. Unremarkable in almost every way, there are some things about the Gibson SG that make it great, like how thin it is and its low weight. That way, when you get it home, start playing, and quickly realize it doesn't sound or feel nearly as good as you'd imagined, its lightweight makes it easy to carry down to the basement where it'll sit for the next 20 years. And its thin design ensures that it doesn't take up much space, so you'll have plenty of room left for all the other worthless guitars you impulsively buy. The SG is Gibson's best-selling guitar, which is good for Gibson, but bad for you because no one will buy yours because they already have one. Like you, they saw Tony Iommi and Angus Young playing an SG and assumed it was a good guitar, just like you assumed buying one would make you look cool. You were wrong on both fronts. But you don't care, because at the end of the day, you still own a Gibson guitar, which allows you to look down on all your Fender-playing friends, even though they're much better musicians than you. And now you know what your guitar says about you, which means it's time for you to hit that subscribe button and tell me what you have to say about your guitar in the comments. You're